It had been 10 years since the horrible incident between Emily, Mark, Holly, and Grandma. Holly was already a teenager. Thanks to therapy, she had overcome her fears and anxiety caused by the last day held by her grandmother. Emily and Mark also progressed in their fears as the months passed and their lives returned to what they always had. But the family's peace of mind began to be clouded the day they received a letter from the psychiatric center. It was from Lisa. She explained to them that she was very sorry for the mistakes she had made in the past. Everything had been caused by trauma after the loss of her 7-year-old daughter in the pool. At that time, she hadn't been able to accept it and live in a world where her little girl was no longer there. And she was trying to find a culprit and a replacement for the void that had been left. For this reason, she blamed her son, when he was only 5 years old, for letting her sister die and not saving her. And she wanted to get her back by trying to turn her granddaughter into a copy of her deceased daughter. Mark began to get nervous as Emily read the first words of the letter aloud. He didn't want to hear excuses that would bring back the pain of the past. But his wife continued reading until the end. Before saying goodbye, Lisa told them that the doctors considered that with the medication and therapy she was once again fit to visit and leave the center. She had learned very well from her mistakes and had worked to change her behavior. She asked them not to forget her and to let her show them all her repentance because she didn't have much time left. When Emily read the last sentence, she was thoughtful. What do you think she meant by saying she doesn't have much time left? Is she sick? Mark took the letter from her hands and looked into her eyes. Emily, don't start. My mother is a textbook manipulator. I don't know if she's sick or not, but what I know is that no matter how much therapy she does, she will continue to be the woman who almost ended my family. Promise me you will not do anything crazy. She nodded and gave her husband a hug. Once again, she felt that terrible feeling of suffocation in her chest, which had taken her so long to diminish. Neither parent wanted to tell Holly the news about her grandmother, although little by little the kitchen drawer began to fill with several letters from the woman imploring their forgiveness. And the young woman ended up finding out. She, who had a personality very similar to her mother, felt sorry for the old woman. Her memories may have been more clouded by having lived them as a child, but when she read her grandmother's letter, she couldn't contain her tears and compassion for her. I know she has hurt us a lot, but what if she's dying? We must give her the opportunity to apologize. She's alone, and she will die alone in that center if we don't go see her. As she spoke, a tear slid down the young woman's cheek, and upon seeing her, also her mother. However, her father remained serious. He was disappointed, and he felt misunderstood to see that the two could forgive something so serious for him. I am not going to prevent you from anything, but please just promise me that you will be careful. Emily and Holly, after a long discussion, finally decided to give Lisa a chance to visit and apologize. They called the psychiatric center and coordinated the details to meet the grandmother one afternoon in one of its wards. However, the next day, just as mother and daughter were about to leave the house, the doorbell surprised them. Emily went straight to the door and came face to face with Lisa's fragile figure. Although she now seemed serene and different from the person who had caused them so much suffering, she couldn't help but feel a tremor in her voice and in her hands. Lisa smiled kindly and asked permission to enter. Holly walked over and helped her mother out of that tense moment by inviting her grandmother inside. The first few seconds, the tension in the air was palpable, but the grandmother took the initiative and with a smile began to tell them what her life had been like in the last few years in the psychiatric center. Sharing stories about the new friends she had made and the therapeutic activities she did, she was trying to convince Emily and Holly that she had changed, that she was now seeking peace and forgiveness. Although her speech seemed sincere, Emily couldn't help but squeeze her daughter's hand tightly every time Lisa got too close. The conversation seemed to relax until Mark returned home. When he entered and saw the three women laughing in the living room, his face tightened. Nervous and barely able to speak, Mark stared at Lisa and in a firm voice asked her to leave. His mother tried to explain that she just wanted to rebuild her relationship with her family. However, Mark was not willing to give in. His memories of the past were still too fresh in his mind. Holly was disappointed in her father, and Emily tried to mediate and smooth the situation, but Mark insisted that he didn't want his mother around. Finally, Lisa, with an expression of sadness and resignation, got up and left the house. The granddaughter got up and offered to accompany her to the door, but her grandmother told her that it was not necessary, that she knew the way out. Emily, Mark, and Holly, meanwhile, remained silent in the living room, feeling uncomfortable. What they didn't know was that before leaving, the grandmother had grabbed a set of keys from the little box they had at the entrance, where they always left their keys when they arrived. The family slept that night thinking about the situation. The next day, everyone left the house. Holly went to school and Mark and Emily went to their respective jobs. When the house was empty, the grandmother entered, using the keys with several shopping bags. In the room where Holly slept, there was a part of the ceiling that slid down and from which a ladder fell to go up to the attic. The grandmother carefully entered the attic through the stairs and brought up everything she had in her bags. There, she carried several cans of food, drinks, and blankets. She prepared a kind of dwelling with everything she had there. She used an old mattress, several cushions, and made a bed. And from another bag, she took out the photo of her deceased daughter and placed it on a small table. "We will be together again, Lena. No matter how grown up you are, you will always be my little girl," the lady said while kissing the photo of her daughter, who had a great resemblance to Holly. Suddenly, she heard noises, so she closed the access to the attic tightly and remained silent. Putting her ear to the floor, she could hear Holly come into her room. It seemed to her that she was talking to herself until she realized that she was talking to someone on the phone. And from the tone of the conversation, something told her that it was with the boy. Lisa became tense. She thought that her daughter was still too young to have a boyfriend. She didn't like that. Hours later, everyone left the house again, and then Lisa took the opportunity to go back down to the house. There, she took a shower and was browsing through Holly's personal belongings. For the next few days, Lisa continued her strange routine. She waited patiently for the house to be empty before descending from her makeshift shelter in the attic and exploring her granddaughter's life. She immersed herself in her belongings and read her diary, although she tried hard not to leave a trace of her presence. Her obsession intensified when she discovered that Holly was in a relationship with a boy named Alex. The grandmother spied on every message and every interaction, fearing that this boy could influence the young woman's life in some negative way. One of those days, Lisa put her ear to the ground to try to hear as much as she could of a conversation between Holly and Emily. Her mother told her that she had to accompany her father to a doctor's appointment and then they would do some shopping at the mall. She asked the young woman if she wanted to go with them and she answered no, she would stay at home watching a movie. After a short time, Lisa could no longer hear the young woman in her room. So she went down through the trapdoor and looked for her granddaughter around the house, being very careful not to make noise. When she reached the door to the living room, she was surprised to hear Holly talking to someone. She thought she was alone. She looked through one of the glass windows in the door and saw that her granddaughter was hugging a boy and they were exchanging affectionate words. Holly had taken advantage of the moment when her parents weren't at home to call her boyfriend and secretly stay alone. Lisa couldn't stand that image. She had to do something. Suddenly, she saw how the boy got up and told her granddaughter that he was going to the bathroom. Lisa ran to crouch behind one of the bedroom doors. While the young man was in the bathroom, the grandmother quietly went to the kitchen and grabbed one of the knives. As soon as the boy grabbed the door handle and left the bathroom, she surprised him on the other side by covering his mouth and stabbing him several times in the stomach. "You will never touch my sweet girl again." Meanwhile, Holly remained in the living room, ignoring the noise of the television. The grandmother left the boy lying in the bathroom and ran back to her hiding place. It wouldn't take long for Holly to find her boyfriend's lifeless body. Just as she closed the access to the stairs, she could hear a scream that made the walls shake. The grandmother remained hidden. In the attic, no one would look for her. Everyone would assume that the murderer had escaped. The next day, the grandmother took advantage of one of the moments in which everyone had left the house to shower and go outside. As she crossed the front yard, a neighbor greeted her and asked if Emily was home. Oh, well, no. I just came to visit them, but no one has opened the door. The grandmother replied, uncomfortable at having been discovered around the house. When the family returned home, the same neighbor approached them. He wanted to give them a package that a delivery man had left for them. Mark thanked him for the gesture, and when they were about to say goodbye, something stopped him. This morning, another lady also came to visit you. I thought you were at home, but she told me no. That's why I waited until the afternoon to bring it to you. Mark turned pale and asked for a physical description of the lady he had seen. And of course, it was Lisa. Emily grabbed her husband's arm and asked him what was happening. Mark swallowed and asked Holly to come into the house, and once he was alone with his wife, he asked her if she thought Grandma could be behind the death of Holly's boyfriend. Emily put her hand on her chest and, startled, told him that it couldn't be, but a terrible doubt had already taken hold of her too. They entered the house and the woman began to prepare dinner. When she opened the cutlery drawer, something didn't feel right. They were all carefully placed, straight and aligned. Something that wasn't usual in their family. She only knew one person with that level of obsession. She started to sweat. She took off her apron, put on her shoes, and said goodbye to her husband and daughter. She had to do something to find out if the nightmare was repeating itself. When she wanted to grab her house keys, she saw that they were gone. She asked her husband and daughter if anyone had kept them out of confusion, but they both replied that they only had their own. The fact that the house keys had disappeared could explain why someone entered the home to murder her daughter's boyfriend without forcing the door. But who had access there? She got in the car and headed to the psychiatric center. When she arrived, she asked the receptionist if she could see Lisa. Her hands began to shake when she told her that Lisa had been gone for several days. She had told them that she had a place to stay and that she would spend a few days disconnecting. Emily did not like that at all. More and more things made her think that her grandmother was still the maniacal murderer they knew. When she was driving home, something made her hit the brakes. It was the grandmother who was walking near her house. Nervously, Emily asked her what she was doing there, and the grandmother told her that she was going to pay them a visit. Lisa, where have you been these last 2 days? I have gone to the center and they have told me that you have not slept there, she told her threateningly. The grandmother already had an alibi prepared. Oh, I'm spending a few days at a friend's house. She's away on vacation and she asked me to stay there taking care of her plants. Emily did not believe her. So you won't have a problem inviting me for coffee and a chat at the house you're staying at, right? Lisa smiled. She knew Emily was suspicious, but she would manage to continue deceiving her. She told her that she would call her tomorrow and send her the address. That afternoon, Mark and Holly didn't leave the house at any time, so Grandma had nowhere to spend the night. Trying to have a place to stay, she looked for easy prey. Walking down the street, she saw how a little old woman walked slowly with bags in her hand to enter her home. Lisa offered to help her, and the lady smiled at her. When they were inside, the grandmother hit her on the head with a vase and left her unconscious on the floor. The next morning, Lisa sent the location of the house to Emily. Shortly after, the woman showed up at the door. Emily had to know if Lisa had an alibi to make sure she wasn't the one who had entered her house to kill. So she began to ask her questions, but the grandmother had a very well-prepared speech. For every question, she had a perfect excuse that exonerated her. At one point, Emily asked her why it smelled so unpleasant there. Lisa apologized, justifying that it was because of the cats. They had defecated all over the room where they slept, but she had been unable to clean it because she was afraid of them. Emily offered to clean it up and got up walking in the direction of where the smell was coming from. But Lisa quickly cut her off and told her that she wanted to meet her and Holly another time because she had been sad that their last conversation had ended so abruptly. Just as she was saying those words, Lisa looked at the floor and saw how blood was beginning to come out from under the door where she had locked the old woman's body. To prevent her daughter-in-law from looking there and not raising suspicions, she asked her to excuse her. Since she had to go to the psychiatric center to get her medication, and with that excuse, she accompanied her to the exit. Lisa had to get out of that house before someone missed the old woman. So she waited just enough time for Emily to get to work, and she went to her son and daughter-in-law's house to hide in the attic again. When Emily finished at work, she decided to return home to where Lisa was living to apologize. That lady had changed, and she hadn't been fair. But when she passed by, she saw a police car stopped in front of the house. She approached them and asked one of the officers what had happened, since her mother-in-law was there. Then the police officer asked her if she was a direct relative of the deceased. Deceased? Oh God, I saw her a few hours ago. The agents told her that she had to present a statement to reconstruct the events and ask her to accompany them to the ambulance to identify the body. Emily, with tears in her eyes, agreed. But her face was tinged with terror when they opened the zipper of the cloth that covered the corpse, and she saw that the woman didn't know her. Grandma had tricked her again. She told everything that happened to the police and told them that their family was in danger. Lisa had been the murderer of her daughter's boyfriend. She was sure. The police accompanied her home to check if the family was okay. Seeing that his wife came in with agents, Mark nervously asked them what had happened to her. Emily told him everything she had discovered and asked her husband where their daughter was. He replied that she was studying in a room. The mother went there to hug her and discovered that the room was completely disordered, as if someone had hid everything. And the worst thing, her daughter was not there. Emily began to scream and cry desperately, when suddenly Mark put a finger to her lips and asked his wife to listen. Immediately, everyone looked at the ceiling, and without wasting time, they opened the access to go up to the attic. There was the grandmother, who was holding her granddaughter by the hair and holding a knife to her neck. Don't do it, Lisa. If you love Holly, do not do it. Emily cried and pleaded. The grandmother asked everyone to leave there if they didn't want something bad to happen. Mark, determined and confident that his mother would never hurt Holly because she was the only person she loved, lay on top of his mother and took the knife from her. In this struggle, the man ended up wounded in the abdomen and his daughter ran into her mother's arms. The grandmother, out of her mind, threatened the police officers with stabbing Mark with the knife more times if they didn't let her go. And everyone knew that she would have no mercy with her son and would keep her word. Emily yelled at the officers to let her go. She couldn't allow her mother-in-law to end her husband's life, and they did it like that. Once again, the murderer's grandmother had escaped without being convicted of her crimes. But could it have been the last? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode!